It's a fascinating text. The whole chapter in 1 Corinthians is about speaking in tongues. And when the kind of tongues they're speaking in here is the kind of tongues where they're babbling, and babbling might be the word for it, where it sounds incoherent. It sounds like they're speaking a different language. And the people around them don't understand what they're saying. That's the kind of tongues they're speaking here. That's what's going on. So similar to what you might see in a charismatic church today. It looks similar. That's the kind of experience they're having here. What Paul is saying here is people are doing that, but there's no one translating what the babbling means. And so it's not really helpful for the group. Like, I'm glad you're speaking in tongues. That's a good thing. I do it. Others do it. It's a good thing. But we really want, whenever you're doing that, we want everyone else to know what's going on and to be blessed and participate in what's going on there. And so it's important to note, he's not delegitimizing it. He's not saying it's fake. He's saying even I do it. Later on, if you keep reading, he'll say I do it. But sometimes what a lot of groups will do is they almost weaponize this text. And the big takeaway is, if you speak in tongues, you got to have an interpreter. If there's no interpreter, quit doing it. And which there might be an argument there. There might be something to say. It's probably a nice point that, speaking in tongues, you need an interpreter. But it's really sad when we just take a text and use it for an argument. If every Bible verse I use is to read it and say, and I'm right and that person's wrong, I'm probably doing it wrong. I probably need to look a little bit further. I need to read the text against myself and say, what is this text challenging me to do? How is this text shaping me? I think there's a lot of church shaping and individual shaping that can happen through reading this text. One thing Paul's really pointing out here, and throughout all of 1 Corinthians, one of the big theses, one of the big themes seems to be, you are making worship of God about you. You are making the gathering of Christians about you. You are making church about you. And maybe you need to rethink this. And so as we kind of talk about, hey, why is church so boring? One of the big concerns here is, are you kind of coming with this consumer-driven, me-first mindset? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not accusing you of that, but if we all self-reflect, I know I'm guilty of it sometimes. And so what Paul is saying is, hey, those of you speaking in tongues, I'm glad you're being spiritually edified. I think some of us, we come to church and we want to be spiritually edified. A phrase I hear a lot is, we all come to church and we want to get something out of it. Maybe you've heard people say that, or you've said that. And when we say that, what do we mean? I want to get something out of it when I go to church. Maybe we want to learn something new. Maybe we want to be encouraged to do something new in a different way. Maybe we want to feel closer to God or feel like we have some kind of encounter with God. And so it's not totally wrong to come to church and want to get something out of it. But what Paul's pointing out here is, hey, you're coming to church and you're speaking in tongues and you're being edified and you're having this experience with God, but it's about you and not about everybody else. And in fact, it's actually a little distracting. And so we'll see him unpack that a little bit more in a minute. Lower down in chapter 14, we get this heading, and it's not in it's not in every version. It'll say something about orderly worship. And we've kind of taken that heading and ran with it. Depending on what translation you have, those headings are going to be in different places, and they're going to say different things. These are not original to the text. So that's important to note. But in our Christian tradition, we've kind of taken this orderly worship bit to mean 2 songs and a prayer and a welcome and 2 songs and communion, and make sure you do the bread first. And, we real specific, real predictable service is kind of what we've taken with this verse. And that's fine. It's not wrong, but it's not really what Paul was getting at here. If you look, Paul in verse 31, kind of the end of the matter, Paul's really, when he speaks of orderly worship, he's getting at something different. Verse 31 says, for you can all prophesy one by one. So part of what he's saying is, take turns. Because what you can tell is going on is they're in this service and multiple people are all speaking in tongues at once, almost like they're competing. And it's distracting and no one knows what's going on. And he actually says, like, if an outsider comes in, they're going to think you're crazy. They're not going to know what's going on. You guys need to do this one by one. Take turns. And then it says, do that, verse 31, so that all may learn and all be encouraged. Again, he's kind of pointing to this speaking in tongues thing is good for you, but without anyone else knowing what you're saying, it's only you, not everybody. You need to be worried about everybody. And then he says, the spirits of prophets are subject to the prophets. The spirits of prophets are subject to the prophets. What he's saying is you can control it. If the spirit comes over you and starts making you, you can contain it for a moment. Because probably what was going on is someone standing up and speaking in tongues, and then another one jumps up and interrupts him and starts speaking in tongues. And he's saying, hey, you can control that. Rein it in and let them finish. Like, we're going to take turns. We're going to do this in an orderly manner. So that's kind of what's going on there. And then look what he says in verse 12. This is all in chapter 14. Since you're eager, and I think this is the biggest takeaway for me from 1 Corinthians. Since you're eager for gifts of the Spirit, try to excel in those that build up the church. When you come to worship, when you come to gather with the Christian family, it shouldn't be, what do I get out of it? It should be, how can I bless others? How can I lift up the rest of the church? Because this isn't all about me. Let's come here and make this about others, not self. Let's worry about others' needs, what God wants, and how he's going to form and shape all of us, not just me. And Corinth had this me first attitude in way more ways than just this. They wouldn't wait on others during communion. They would just come and have communion. They don't care if the rest of the body is there or not. They insist that they have a right to do anything. A right to do anything, so much to the point where even if it hurts somebody else in the church, it doesn't matter. I get to do me. They had this. Different groups had different preferred leaders, and they kind of pitted them against each other. And so you can see Corinth really had this problem of coming and making church about me. And so when we ask this question, why is it boring? You kind of need to ask, okay, well, am I just kind of like being selfish and making this about me? Maybe, maybe not. But I think we all need to reflect on this text and say, in what ways am I coming here and just wanting me to be edified and just concerned about my preferences? Because that's a dangerous path to go down. But this church, Corinth, looked very consumer driven, very much about what the people want. And that's kind of what the church today is tempted to do. We get very consumer driven. And I think another thing we need to ask, and I think Chad was kind of alluding to this, is when I come to church, am I putting forth my best effort to engage? Society now is so entertainment driven, right? Like we have more access to entertainment on here than like any point in history, right? Any show, any movie, book, game, all in the palm of your hand. That's another reason I'm like, you're not allowed to be bored. You have access to all kinds of entertainment right there. But one of the things that's really been unhealthy about it, amongst other things, is that it's really easy entertainment. I don't really have to mentally engage at all. Some games that we play on our phones, it like just keeps our mind just busy enough to kind of have that numbing feeling, right? We don't have to engage or put forth any thought or effort. And so, unfortunately, because entertainment has become so easy and it requires no effort on our part, maybe we're coming to church and doing the same thing. I want to come, I want to have a nice pew, I want a nice, I want some coffee, a comfortable seat, a nice uplifting worship service. I want to be engaged, and I don't really want to have to think or do that much work. I don't really want to have to put forth that much effort. I'm not saying, oh, you guys feel that way, but some of us might come. I think our culture is coming with this approach now. Something one of my friends said the other day that I thought was such a lame dad thing to say, but I liked it, is he said, being bored is a choice. Tell your kids that later. Being bored is a choice. And it's true. Boredom leads to creativity. It should. Boredom should lead to creativity. I'm bored. I don't know what to do. I'm going to figure out something to do. I'm going to go be imaginative and creative, or I'm going to find something. And a common critique of phones and media now is that we've been given this easy solution to boredom, so we're losing creativity. We're not going out and doing interesting things and enjoying life. And maybe there's actually a lot of brilliant people out there who aren't using their gifts, who aren't blessing the world and inventing things and shaping things because they're really busy playing Clash Royale and watching Love is Blind. That might need a change. But what I'm getting at here is entertainment and the solution of boredom has become so easy, and it's just been handed to us. And are we coming to church and wanting it to just be handed to us? Don't make me engage. Don't make me think. Don't make me. And so I think really what Chad was saying is kind of a good example of this is you could come here and you could say, oh, this song, it's 100 years old. These words don't mean me. I don't even know what I'm saying, which I think is a fair argument. But then you can also say, well, what is it saying? What do these words mean? What is them? And that takes a little more mental effort, right? You got to take a little bit more time to research and think through. You have to engage a little bit more. But when you engage your mind a little bit more, a song that was boring and seemed meaningless might actually be really uplifting and really interesting and really formative. So I guess what I'm getting at with this whole spiel is sometimes if you're bored, you need to ask yourself, is it because I'm just expecting to just sit back and receive everything, or am I trying to engage in some way? Does there need to be more effort on my part? And Paul in this text, he's saying it's not about you, it's about others. And so I think this can really apply with our conversation this morning is when you come to church, you don't ask, how can I receive and how can I not be bored? That probably shouldn't be your mindset coming in. But what can I do to church to bless others and help them receive? And I really think if you come to church with that agenda, to engage with what's going on and to serve, boredom's probably not going to be a problem if that's what you come here thinking. So first when we talk about is the church boring, why is church boring? We need to say, okay, am I being consumer driven? Then second, you need to say, okay, am I investing? Am I putting forth effort? Am I trying to engage the way I should, or am I just trying to be a recipient? And so after you've asked those things, I think it really is then time to say, hey, is there something that is there something we could be doing different at our gathering? Is there something that the leadership needs to be rethinking? Are we doing something wrong? Because if people come together to worship God and it feels meaningless or repetitive, or our prayers just feel like rote words, if we feel like there's just no emotion or feeling or connection, maybe there's something wrong. If we're coming up here and putting up these disingenuous fronts and pretending to have it all together and nobody's being real and saying what's really going on in their lives, that might actually be pretty boring. That might be pretty boring. We might need to do something about that. And again, I should say, I do not want to make entertainment a goal. I know it's like in youth ministry, this is always a thing, like, oh, they just want to go and have fun. And usually it's, hey, we want to do something to draw people into fellowship and to draw people here. And I know there is like this pitfall of, well, we want to get people here and we want to make it entertaining and then we'll give them some Jesus, and then it ends up being more about the entertainment than actual discipleship, right? I think that's a common pitfall and a common thing we get worried about. And it's easy to critique other churches or that church, they got a smoke machine. Or, oh, their preacher can do a cartwheel. There's things like that where we can really like critique them. And I would like to say like we really need, and I think we do a pretty good job. I think Westgate has a pretty good culture of this, of not being critical of other churches. Now, we can look at other churches and we can learn from their mistakes, but we can also learn from the good things they do. But I think it's best that we create a culture here that's rooting for other churches, that has a kingdom mindset. We got another church down the street that's going to join us soon, and we really need to make a practice of that. We want to do our best to build up other churches and root for them because we have a kingdom mindset. But then again, like I'm saying, I think before we start critiquing, we need to look inward. And I know not at a church like Westgate would never be about entertainment. But maybe there's some other things that we do, and we come in here with this, I want things in here a certain way mindset, right? We like our service in a certain way with our preferred songs, our preferred sermon lengths, and our preferred dress and preferred style. And what we end up doing a lot of times is we take our preferences and we confuse them with law. And we start saying, this is the way God wants it. When in reality, this is the way I want it, and I've just danced around with Scripture to justify it. So we need to be really careful about us possibly doing that. Because we don't want to be me-driven. We don't want to be my preference-driven. But we might be guilty. We really, in the Churches of Christ tradition, we like things pretty plain, pretty simple, right? The same friend who asked me growing up, why does it have to be so boring? He said, your church was the plainest church I've ever been to. No decorations, just no instruments. And I just remember thinking, that's right, baby. That's how we do. Because that's become my preference. That's become something I'm used to. But I also need to realize, hey, maybe that's not for everybody, and maybe there's space for doing things differently. So we need to think, is there something we are doing here that's losing its meaning and making this not engaging? Every church should ask that, not just us. Are we coming here and robotically doing things? Are we just sitting in pews and punching a card? Are we participating in traditions that used to have a purpose and a meaning behind them, but now don't really? Because that could be boring. If you're doing just rote traditions, that's boring. And that something should be changed there. Is communion? Are we turning communion into just this like side snack thing? Are we setting low expectations? Low expectations are boring. If you're bored, maybe it's because leadership or your boss at work or your teacher has low expectations. Maybe we need to raise those up. Maybe church leadership needs to raise up higher to expect more from people. So while it feels kind of immature and me-centered to say church is boring, it is also important to ask, hey, what is the best use of our time? If we're going to give this time to God, what is the best use of it? Should we spend more time in the worship service or more time in Christian service? Should we spend more time studying the Scriptures, or should we spend more time living the Scriptures? We need space for that. Is the class and sermon content offered appropriately challenging? And I think it should be challenging. I know I've said before, I think some people would be happy coming to church and just being told, you're right about everything. You're good. Those people down the street, they're all wrong, but you're right and you're good. But that wouldn't be very challenging, and that would actually be very boring and very unhealthy. You need to be challenged. But as I think through like just the whole, this unfair stereotype really pushed in the media, Ned Flanders is the number one. Ned Flanders shows like being a Christian is just so dull and boring. It's really unfair. Being a Christian has brought me into a very exciting and loving community. Being a Christian has given me some of the best, closest friendships that I will ever have. Being a Christian has challenged me to serve in radical ways, to do scary things I would never do alone. It's encouraged me to push myself. It's offered me awesome experiences. I've been to some cool places, had some great experiences because I decided to take faith risks with Christ, and other Christians decided to take those faith risks with me. So being a Christian is definitely not boring. It should not be boring. If being a Christian feels boring, you probably need to change something. You guys get a bonus question this morning. Because I feel like this is a good example of some of the things we've been talking about. So another a fun question that a parent told me was asked was, does Brady really mean it when he offers an invitation? And I'm a little bit shamed by that question, but no, I totally get it. It probably appears sometimes when I offer an invitation up here that it is robotic and meaningless. And there's a part of me where it's like, dude, I don't know how to end a sermon. without saying, Chad, I'm not actually ending it right now, as together we stand and sing. Okay, I don't know how to do it. It is such a common practice. And I know on the other side of that is Westgate has become a church where, for whatever reason, ever since I've been here, we rarely have people come to the front to be prayed over. It's a rare occurrence. And so, if I'm being really honest, there are a lot of times where I offer the invitation just out of a formality, not expecting people to come up. And like, that sounds bad, but that's honest, right? I mean, do you guys expect someone to come up whenever we do it? Like, probably mostly not, right? And so I'll just be like, address that now. And so maybe sometimes because of that, I have said it in ways that sound very nonchalant. And but so on the other side of that, I do want to say, I understand why it would look that way, and that's not always the expectation. But I sure hope you know that's a real invitation. I sure hope you know that we really do want to pray for you. We really do want to bless you. And thinking about rote and outdated traditions, I don't think this one's quite there yet, but I bring this up because it is a very good example of this. One is a lot of people think that there's somewhere in the Bible where it says you have to offer an invitation. And it ain't in there. And I mean, we've had people, I know there's been a time in the past where someone said, if you don't offer an invitation next Sunday, I'm walking out. I'm not going to church there anymore. That's making a tradition into a law. It is a tradition that we borrowed from a second grade awakening from the Baptists and Methodists. They started it and we said, hey, that's cool. We like that. We're going to do that here. So let's not make that tradition into a law. But the other thing is I think Westgate's got other modes of handling sin issues, of handling prayer needs. And so instead of coming up here in the front on Sunday morning and being prayed over by everyone, which is great and which I would love to do, people have chosen to come to an elder privately, reach out to me via text or email, reach out to the church. There are other ways to receive the invitation, to participate in that. And so as we're about to offer the invitation, I want to throw that out there, that the invitation isn't just this one thing we do on Sunday morning, and if nobody comes up right here, it means nobody received the invitation. There's a lot of other ways to respond to that, and the invitation is open during the week. My office is open. You know how to reach the church. I think my number's in the bulletin. So there's a lot of ways to reach out and engage with the invitation that happens other than just right here. And I know it can be threatening, like coming up here and like, you know, having, and I think even in some of the old school things, it means, if you come forward, it means you got in trouble. It doesn't have to mean that. But if that's the connotation it has, then we probably should do something different, because it means that tradition's not working anymore. Maybe 50 years ago, people were coming forward every Sunday. And I know some churches still have that expectation, like, maybe we should do it today. Chad, let's just sing on repeat until people come forward, right? Let's just make it happen. We're not going to do that to you. But there is some point where we say, hey, just because this worked 50 years ago, maybe it's not working now, and we need to either drop it or retool it. And I think that's important. And I'm not saying we get rid of the invitation, but I'm saying this is a really good example of how church can become boring and seen rote and monotonous if there's something that used to work and it doesn't anymore, but we're still doing it. Okay? So we'll probably be thinking about some things, and we've tried to do some things differently with the invitation, but I'm going to offer one now, and when I say those key words, Chad, I'm going to mean it this time. But it really is important. If you want to come forward and be prayed for by the whole congregation, that offer is open. But we got elders, shepherds, friends, emails. There are so many different, and you can show up here. Man, we want to pray with you. We want to know what's going on in your life. We want to encourage you. So the invitation is not for just right now, but it is for the whole week. And so if you have any needs, we invite you to join us later in the week, or to come now as together we stand and sing.